Welcome to User Friendly 2.0 with host Bill Sikkens, Technology Architect.
And this is User Friendly 2.0. Welcome to this week's show. Bill, Gretchen, welcome.
Hello.
Hello there.
So we sort of got to go to the Oregon Air Show. We're going to be talking about that a little bit in a news item that's coming up this week. And our second segment this week is some programming that you have been asking questions for. We're going to be covering video game consoles, specifically some that have failed and why over the years. So that's coming up in our second segment. So with no further ado, let's jump into the news. What do we have this week?
All right. Are graphic card rentals a thing?
You know, this is a question that's been coming in, and the thing of it is I don't know, Bill, how much is a a good gaming graphics card now? It's still a couple grand, right?
Yeah, easily.
So the idea of renting graphic cards kind of makes sense. So if you're buying a computer, the graphics card can cost more than the system itself. So what we're talking about here, for anybody that's not into gaming or hasn't heard of this, is when you have a computer, modern computer, one of the components that's in it is a separate processor that does your video. And this has been done for a while. This is not new technology or anything like it. The idea being that it's taking the load of doing video off of the main processor and setting it up in a way that you can get a lot more out of it because it's its own thing. So the quality of this additional device, this additional graphics processor, allows for the computer to do more or less depending on what it is. So if you have a machine that you're just using what most people do, where you're browsing the web, sending emails, writing word processing documents, that kind of thing, you have a situation where you don't really need that expensive of a graphic card to carry all that out. Most of the ones on the market now will handle your Windows, whether it's a PC or a Mac, they're drawing out the screens, doing all that kind of stuff in a fast, timely way. That's pretty normal. But gamers require additional hardware. And Bill, you know a little bit more about that. Can you talk polygons and a little bit of what a game graphic card does that differs from standard graphics?
Well, it also does physics, so it does math. It also does, like you said, rendering for polygons, which by today's standards are huge numbers. And to some degree, I understand that the new video cards also handle AI.
Yeah, that's an upcoming thing that's been in there. And so what you're dealing with is powerful computer hardware, and powerful computer hardware costs money. It's kind of what it comes down to. And Bill, you touched upon AI. One of the other things is graphic cards in of themselves are repurposed, and sometimes to train AI models, and also for things like Bitcoin mining. So that's also been running prices up too because of supply and demand. So when you're talking about something that's $2,000 or more, the idea of renting that kind of makes sense. But then I'm thinking as well, if I rented a graphic card and paid, for a certain amount of time on it, and got this thing, and what happens if you don't send it back? You've got a huge thing. Well, that's not what this actually is. Companies are renting out GPU compute time, not sending you the card in the mail.
Oh.
Which means you're renting time on a server somewhere to be able to use the graphic capability on that machine in a timeshare.
Yeah.
How does that work? Wouldn't you have some lag time from
Yes.
Yeah, okay. You understand what I'm getting at.
Yeah, no, that definitely is a thing, because you'd be receiving the video feed remotely and stuff. However, with higher speed internet connections and things, that's becoming minimal. It's not gone by any stretch of the imagination, but it's suitable enough that in certain situations it's worth doing. So you connect to a server over the internet and you pay for access by the second, minute, or hour, depending on what you're doing. Some of the companies that are doing this are companies like RunPod, Vast.ai, CodeWeave, and others that provide the service. And so you would go out and basically pay for this timeshare. And again, what's really pushing the price up of these things is AI, because it's taking the hardware that would normally be used in this way and using it for another purpose, with companies that have sometimes unlimited budgets, so they buy up the stock. Not that the graphic cards would be cheap anyway, but it just is a thing. And then the other place, Bill, you were talking about some of the applications. We're also seeing this in things like physics labs and those kind of areas where they have 3D rendering, computational computing of that nature, putting together designs. Gretchen, an area you worked with AutoCAD, that uses a lot of these higher end cards too. So you have a thing where you're supply and demand. So that's what's going on here. So, the highest end graphic cards, by the way, can run 20,000 plus. So it's not just, yeah. And consumer oriented cards, which are like your Raytheon RTX 3090, 4090, those kind of numbers, those go for about 69 cents an hour. So it gives you an idea of what is going on with all of that and where this goes. So if you need a GPU for only 20 hours, it makes sense to maybe do it this way. And it's not necessarily for gaming, but it could be. So, there's even an Airbnb-ish version of this. This is Vast.ai's model. And they make the machines available so different operators can do it, and then customers can rent out the capacity. So in other words, it'd be like the three of us would put up a server with one of these monster cards and pay for it, and then we would go through this company where they would have customers that would rent time on our systems, kind of like an Airbnb.
Okay. Weird.
Boy.
Okay.
Used booksellers are racking up huge sales.
Yeah, and I was looking at this too, and it's kind of interesting, and it wasn't because I somehow knew about this, but I've been going through and cleaning out some things and put a box of used books up on eBay, which normally take a while to sell. And it was gone within 2 hours, and it was just random books. And I didn't even think about it. I was just like, oh, great, I don't need these anymore. And they sold for a decent amount. It wasn't like it was 10 cents on the dollar or something. And then I got this article, Gretchen, that I think you found.
Yes.
And being reported by Gizmodo. Mike Perrell is the writer of this. And basically what's going on here is you have a situation, and I can only speak to this as a layman, not as like a legal thing, but from my understanding of this, what's going on here is companies that are training large language models or AI models were using copyrighted material. And there's been some kind of a court decision saying, well, you can't do that illegally unless you have a right to do that. However, if you own the work, the fair use doctrine allows you to use it for this purpose. So what's happening is used books are being bought all over the world. They're slicing the spines off, scanning them in, destroying the original copy because you can only have one copy legally, and then using that to train the model. So as somebody that's a bit of a book lover, that makes me shudder a little bit.
And it also makes me worried that what if these are historical things that they've grabbed that are extremely rare and they're destroying it?
Yeah, and that's what's happening.
Yeah.
I've seen a few other things about this. It's quite bad.
But what have you seen, Bill, that's beyond kind of the headline here?
Basically that I believe it was one of the bigger ones. I'm not going to say which one because I can't remember completely, but it was in one of their memos about, what did they call it? Destructive cultivation or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't heard that term, but that makes sense.
But it was basically that. It was they were destroying books to feed their machines, and it was disgusting.
And there was an interview on this carried by the BBC. It's a little outside of the initial article we're talking on here, where there was a bookseller, I believe in London, that was talking about this. And he's saying, he's trying to look at this from a standpoint that if it's books these people are buying, that there's a lot of copies of them, like the Da Vinci Code or something that's been mass produced. That's one thing,
Yeah.
Destroy one copy of that, it's not going to be a big deal. Or even some of the rare books, like say you have a textbook where only 100 were made and 75 are in libraries. That's still not such a big deal. But some other things where there have been destruction of very, very rare books, and that kind of a thing is a problem. And how do you can refuse to sell them, in that case, but then do you refuse to sell it? And if you're a bookstore, it's a problem.
Yeah.
It's a problem.
Yeah.
All right. This is a little happier. Guess what? NASA has a YouTube channel.
I'm shocked. I can't believe it. They have a YouTube channel. What's YouTube? Anyway.
All right. Stop being stupid.
So, about 60,000 subscribers. They've got a little over 390 videos online, and the YouTube channel is Learn with NASA, and is something kind of fun. We talk about NASA and some of their STEM projects and other things that are going on. And it's cool to actually think about this. And I think it's interesting because obviously they would have a YouTube channel, but it's not something that I would necessarily have thought of right off the bat.
No, me neither.
It makes sense, but so there's all kinds of stuff out there. Yeah, check it out. YouTube, Learn with NASA is the channel name.
And it looks like they've got like little kid oriented stuff along with adult grown up, like a documentary type of films and stuff. So there's quite a variety. So
all right. Back on video cards, NVIDIA to invest $1.5 billion in SB Energy under OpenAI data center deal.
Yeah, so basically that's kind of what the headline says. It's another investment for more data centers. This has been somewhat controversial as time goes by. In fact, a lot of pauses have been put on data center development just because the electrical and water use that's coming out of them. Not that a data center is a bad thing, but what's happening is the impact was not being considered. What was being considered by a lot of places is the tax revenue that was going to come in from building these places. And all of a sudden we've seen stuff where power grids are failing, that kind of thing. But it makes sense. NVIDIA, like Bill, like you were just saying, is a maker of video cards. In fact, the maker these days, pretty much, of these chipsets. And of course, they're going to invest in something that guarantees selling their product. I mean, that just, follow the money, right? So anyway, just another announcement of what's going on here. And yeah.
All right. Errant drone delays Blue Angels demonstration at Oregon International Air Show.
Yeah, so you and I had a chance to kind of go see this this last week.
Yeah.
And Evergreen Air and Space Museum, which is across the street from the airport where this is held in Oregon, was holding a watch party, and we're members of the museum. So it was a lot of fun to go there and check it out, and also be able to check out the museum and stuff at the same time. Great day, great family day. But yeah, apparently somebody was flying a drone in the path of the Blue Angels flight, and this is a bad thing.
Yeah.
If
you're supposed to go and have like a training class in order to fly a drone. I did it. You had me do one.
Yeah. And it's so what you're supposed to do, from what Gretchen was just talking about here, is a standpoint that there are places where you can just fly a drone without a license. That they do exist, and you can look online. There's an app that shows you where all this stuff is. But generally speaking, you go through this process to get a recreational drone license, and it's a pretty straightforward thing. You take an online class, answer questions, and if you pass the test, you get the license. And that's what Gretchen's talking about. I did mine recently too. And one of the things is that you are not supposed to fly drones near airports. And in the case of McMinnville, which is where McMinnville, Oregon, is where the show is held, the municipal airport, the no-fly zone for drones is a 5-mile radius. And these create safety problems. And as somebody myself that likes to fly in the air, in the jet suits and things, you have to be careful, because if you hit one of these things in a plane or even your jetpack or whatever, you're in a situation where it can cause a lot of damage. It can kill you. And it's because these people are being indiscriminate and not following the law.
Yeah.
And in this particular case, the Blue Angels were doing demonstration flights at all 3 days of the show, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We saw them on, Gretchen, Sunday, I think.
Yeah.
And when we were there. And yeah, they had to pause everything to get this individual and his drone out of the airspace from the airport and be able to continue the air show. And by the way, this isn't just a situation where it's causing inconvenience or this type of a thing. The FAA, there's fines and all kinds of other stuff for doing this. Your drone will be confiscated. You could be detained. Just don't do it. And the app's free, to be where it is. And if you want to fly around, jets and all kinds of other things in the air, then get a jetpack and do it safely.
Yeah, when they're also the test, it's free.
Yeah.
I didn't have to pay anything to do the test. And the test teaches you what you need to know as you're taking the test.
Yeah.
So it's a no-brainer. It's very easy. And then you understand, hey, I'm supposed to, be very careful about where I fly this thing.
Yeah. And just a footnote on that, because this has come up, is like Gretchen just said, it is to get a recreational drone license is something that doesn't cost any money. To register your drone afterwards is like $5 through the appropriate website. So if you go on and somebody's going to charge you to take this test or the class or something like that, it's a scam. It is free. Now, if you're doing it for commercial purposes, like you're going to photograph houses for a realtor or a wedding or something like that, that's a completely different scenario.
Yeah.
Recreational drone flying is free. Registering your drone, I think in my case, was $5. So it's just be careful.
Grok raises $350 million to fuel its pivot from AI chips to NeoCloud.
So first question that came up about this was, are we talking Grok or Grok in the sense of...
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
Texas Grok, and no, these are two entirely different things.
Oh, so this isn't the weird AI that was on X?
No, that's correct. That's correct.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're two different things. So what you're dealing with is one Grok is a company, and that's GROQ, which is what we're talking about here. Mm-hmm. The Grok from X is GROK.
Oh,
so
okay.
Not that that's confusing or anything like that.
Oh no, not at all.
But
I thought maybe one of the Groks had escaped from X and decided to start its own business.
Yes. And no, that's a Skynet thing, and we'll talk about that later when the AIs allow us to do. I mean, that's not the case here. So,
so what is Grok with a Q?
Okay, Grok with a Q is a company.
Okay,
and they were doing some work that NVIDIA effectively absorbed, so they're reinventing themselves. And the investment firm was called Disruptive that put this money up, $350 million in new funding, puts a market valuation of Grok at about $3.5 billion. That's a lot of money. And the one thing about it is a year ago, that company was valued at $6.9 billion. So you can see where something like this decreases things. Still a lot of money, but it's almost half. And so originally Grok developed what it called an LPU, or language processing unit, and it was specifically designed to run AI quickly, the interface. And it was being used as a teaching model, training model, and that kind of a thing. And then NVIDIA came in and kind of stole their lunch a little bit on that. So
what's a NeoCloud?
A NeoCloud?
Yeah, what's that?
Well, okay, according to their press release, instead of primarily making the AI chips, we'll provide the infrastructure that lets companies use AI computing. That's a NeoCloud.
Oh.
Okay, think about renting graphic cards. Now we're renting AI space.
Okay.
So, so they're building data centers filled with AI accelerators and rent that computing capacity to companies that don't want to spend the buildings on building their own AI infrastructure. So that's what that is. They're operating 13 data centers across North America, Europe, and the Middle East, as well as Asia. And it says it serves more than 6 million developers, enterprises with AI native companies. So there you are.
All right. Investigators say unprecedented number of Apple users received spyware alert.
So this is being reported by TechCrunch. And the Apple users are just getting bombarded with spyware alerts. And it's something I haven't experienced personally because I do not have Apple products that would be under this kind of a thing. But they're having some problems with that. And as hacking continues to get worse, over the weekend, Apple sent out a new wave of notifications. And this went to customers in 110 different countries.
Wow.
And said that they had been targeted with powerful spyware. So Apple sends these kind of alerts in batches to customers that they believe has been targeted. And this thing called mercenary spyware, at least that's what they're dubbing it, is something where governments are involved in the creation of the spyware that's targeting their customers. And in the last few years, not to this last event, but overall, Apple says it has alerted people in more than 150 countries, but 110 countries in this last batch. And that being the case, it's something where I think definitely raising the, I don't know, people need to be aware that this kind of thing is happening. I can understand why they're doing it. It would be a tough decision to make because it has the idea of, well, your equipment's not secure. I mean, that certainly would be coming up with a notification like this, but educating everybody as much as they can on the idea of these things existing and also giving a rundown of how to protect yourselves does make a lot of sense. So I do give kudos to Apple on at least doing it and making it something to where they're trying to help people deal with this. One of the places that's been targeted with this is Ukraine. Not a shock that would be happening. And they use a lot of Apple devices there. But it's not just limited to that. It's limited to or not limited much at all, to a lot of different parts of the world. So, yeah, if you get one of these alerts, look at it, and you can go online. There's a lot of places to go to get common sense steps to help secure yourself. But a lot of this is still being targeted in the way it has for many years, in that you get an email or a text message or something where they want you to respond or click a link or something of that nature. And when you do go to the website or download the link or whatever the case may be, it installs malicious software on your phone. So if you get an unknown link in an email, certainly in a text message, don't open it. And if you're worried about it, it's claiming to be some company like your bank or whatever, and your account's been compromised, don't do anything that's in the email. Call your bank with a known good phone number that's like on your credit card or on the bank's website, but not one that's linked from within that email. And then check it out there, and you'll probably find that there's nothing wrong at all. So, all right. Well, we've got a few things to talk about here. And I think it's going to be kind of interesting to see where you've gotten to with your Lego project, Gretchen. We might be doing that at the beginning of the next segment, because beforehand, I want to talk about Stuart Fails to Save the Universe, which you finally got me to watch. And I have to say, I thoroughly enjoyed. Tell us a little bit about this.
Okay, well, apparently the characters from The Big Bang Theory, Howard, Leonard, and of course Sheldon, create some kind of crazy device, and it appears that Stuart may have bumped it or did something and created an apocalyptic reality.
Yes.
And he's assisted by, like, Bert. His girlfriend, I can't remember Stuart's girlfriend's name. But she's helping, and the guy with the lisp, Kripke. And Kripke's helping. Which
he's not
everybody's yeah, he's kind of a pain in the butt, but that's his character, you know.
Yeah.
And so we have an unlikely group of people put together trying to set things right, and we get a chance to see what kind of weirdness that the writers have come up with. And you also need to pay attention that every time we see the beginning of the show, the intro, it's different.
Yeah, the opening's different. For those that remember the series, think sort of a version of Sliders, kind of like a play on that. And it was a lot of fun to see what they are coming up with, and I'm looking forward to see what they come up with in the future. And by the way, it's called a quantum entanglement machine. Pretty much standard issue for any, physicist that's out there, or at least theoretical. Maybe not. I'm glad you can't get these on Amazon. But yeah, check it out.
I really love the episode. Oh,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I really loved the episode with Will Wheaton and Bert battling.
Yeah, that was fun. Check it out. This is User Friendly 2.0. We'll be back after the break.
Have you seen him? He's from the future. He's got a really big computer, and he uses it every day, and he uses it in every way. What's he use it for? You know, I'm not that sure, because it uses future technology.
Welcome back. This is User Friendly 2.0. Check out our website. Userfriendly.show is your one stop for everything user friendly. Send us your questions, send us your comments. We'd love to hear from you. And in fact, that is where we got the idea for what we're going to be talking about here, was your questions. And there were lots of them that came in on this. So talking a little bit about historic tech, this week we're going to be going over video game consoles, and specifically some of the ones that didn't quite make it for a variety of reasons. And we're going to go through these and see what ended up happening or didn't happen. And the list, the order that this was put into is somewhat random. So it may be that our number one on the list would not be what you would be considered to be number one on the list. But afterwards, let's meet in the comments. Go to userfriendly.show and give us your feedback on this. Let us know what you think. So the number one on our list was the Atari Jaguar. Came out in 1993, first 64-bit gaming system. This was something that was interesting when it came out. Game that came out on Tempest 2000, which is something that I actually really like. So it had its place, but it had some other weird things too. One of them is that Atari never seemed to get too good at designing controllers. And if you look back at some of their older systems like the Atari 5200, which has what is considered to be the worst controller ever made on a video game system, you can see where this comes from. The Jaguar controller seemed to take that idea, and while it was an analog stick and did work a little bit better, it had a telephone keypad on it, which I'm not
that one.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, at the time, there was no standard on what a game console controller was really supposed to be, so there is that. And other systems also had stuff like this, but it was a situation where they came out with this, and you looked at it in the store, and it gave you the idea of a telephone, and that was a marketing problem for them. And then on top of that, the game library was relatively small compared to others, as well as the resources that Atari had at the time, because they were having all kinds of financial problems with the company and competing against Nintendo, Sega, and later Sony. They just didn't have the budget to do it, and those other systems made them feel obsolete. And this is a system I'd love to get someday, just in my retro collection, but they are somewhat expensive to find a working example of it. So if you happen to have one in the garage, they really aren't worth anything. Go ahead and send them to our address on the website, and I'll let you know.
Uh-huh.
All right, maybe not. All right, next one, also from 1993, was the 3DO Interactive Multiplayer. So 3DO Technologies licensed this to companies such as Panasonic, Goldstar, and Sanyo instead of making a system themselves. Debuted it in the USA at roughly $700, which in 1993 was a lot for a game console.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, in 2026.
I don't even remember this one. The Jaguar I'd heard of, and I remember the weird telephone thing. This one, no clue. Don't even recall it.
It's one that didn't last very long, I know. And again, the price made it out of range for most people. And again, what they were doing here is they had this technology that was a video game console, and third-party manufacturers were making this. And the reason why it was so expensive is, even to this day, most of the money, the way they monetize these things is through the software. So you'll buy a game console or a computer or whatever the case may be at a reduced price, sometimes even cost, making it lower, but then you pay a premium for the games that run on it. And that was not the case here, since it was third-party hardware manufacturers. They couldn't do it that way. So they actually had to sell it and make a markup. The system itself was pretty decent, but not a lot of exclusive games, which is something that drives, console sales and that type of a thing. And the PlayStation arrived, and it was cheaper and had more of a library almost out the gate than this did. And kind of the rest is history from that standpoint. So games such as Road Rash, The Need for Speed, and Star Control 2 were good on this system. And again, it was pretty technically impressive. Our next one is the Sega 32X. Came out a year later in 94. This is one that I'd like to get as an add-on for my Sega Genesis, or actually my Sega Mega Drive. I'm in North America. I have a working Mega Drive. It's a little unusual. And it took a little bit of engineering to get it to work, but it's there.
Please note he's bragging.
Yes, I am bragging, because it was a challenge, believe me. We had to change the frequency that it was putting out at, so instead of PAL, it was NTSC, defeat the region lock, which of course I did not do because that would be bad, and get the thing to just work in general. But it's cool. And anybody else would have spent the $80 on eBay to buy a Genesis if they had wanted one and plug it in and made it work. This cost almost $1,000 to do, but hey, it says Mega Drive. Now, that being said, this was the Sega Genesis or Sega Mega Drive. Just a footnote on that. They were called Mega Drive in Europe, Genesis in North America, but it is the same system. And Genesis was a very popular system by Sega, 16-bit. I had one when I was growing up, so this was a system that was out there, very much a competitor to Nintendo and some of the other things out at the time. And they wanted to upgrade, and this is where Sega started to get themselves into trouble. And they created this thing called the Tower of Power, which is basically all these add-ons for the Genesis or Mega Drive, including the Sega CD, the 32-bit upgrade that we're talking about here, or you waited and bought a Sega Saturn. And this was one of the problems because you could buy all this stuff, or they're coming out with a system that does it all called the Saturn, which is going to be out next. So a lot of people waited. And we've seen this happen in the past where a company will announce their next product while the current one's still making money. And then the current one stops selling because everybody's like, well, we're just going to wait and upgrade later. And that's kind of what you had here. So I want to put one of these things together. The Sega CD modules do command a premium, so I'm trying to find one that's within budget. And then I wonder if the North American Sega CD will work with a Mega Drive. I'll let you know when I know. But yeah, so it was short-lived. These components weren't made for a long time because of the Sega Saturn, which just happens to be the next one on the list, which came out about 2 years later, successor to the Genesis. And they launched it early, which is a little bit unusual, but because usually these things come out late. But the problem that this created is, again, software libraries. It comes down to ecosystem, and the programmers didn't have their stuff ready when the console launched. So that was problem number one. Problem number two was Sega seemed to, at that point, have lost the ability to do business in any kind of a meaningful way because there were a lot of other problems, too, that happened at the time. Original at E3 in 1995, when it was announced, the retail price was going to be $399, and Sony came out and released their system at $100 less, which was also a problem. And PlayStation kind of took their lunch after that. Nintendo remained powerful, but I don't know. And, there's a note on this article here that the Saturn wasn't a failure everywhere, and did better in Japan, had a better library there and was good for 2D games and arcade conversions. And it wasn't a bad console. The controllers were a little weird. They had these plug-in screen things in the console controller, a little bit better than the Wii U did it later. And I like the hardware, but again, in North America, it just wasn't that well, done. Now,
okay, I'm seeing a pattern here. This is it's like all these failures are happening within a short period of time. It was there like the big video game failure era or something like that?
Well, the video game crash was 84. And that took out things like ColecoVision and Intellivision and
but these are all happening in early 90s.
The early 90s. And in that time period, you had something else going on. You had the Nintendo and the Super Nintendo at that point, right? And you had a situation where Nintendo wanted to come out with a product called the Nintendo PlayStation. Now, if you think about that a little bit, Sega has the PlayStation, right? And what happened was this Nintendo had an agreement with Sony that they were going to manufacture the CD component, and Nintendo was going to make a cartridge component. And there are prototypes, and if you have one, you can retire kind of thing, because these are really a lot of money to buy. But there are a few prototypes out in the wild of these combined systems. And then Nintendo went behind the scenes with, I believe, Philips to also get them to make CD drives. So it's kind of, they went around the contract with Sony. It upset Sony, obviously. So Sony said, well, the heck with you. We're just going to produce our own system and we're going to call it a PlayStation. And, well, look at where we are today. Obviously, that didn't go over too well for Nintendo. In fact, it took them out as the market leader because Sony came out with this product, half on superior capability, but half on spite. It cost less. And it really did not only compete with Nintendo, but it knocked Atari and Sega out of the marketplace completely eventually. So that's what was happening in that era.
Something to remember, too, is the Super Nintendo was a 32-bit system. The PlayStation was a 32-bit system.
Right.
Now, of course, we talk about the Jaguar being a 64-bit, but at the time, people didn't really understand that difference between bits and consoles. So Sega and stuff was still running on 16. They boosted it to a 32-bit with the CD and Sega Saturn. But people didn't really understand that problem, and where Nintendo was stuck with cartridges, Sony went with CDs and massively was able to increase their ability to produce massive games.
Yeah.
Just huge games.
And Nintendo has done some weird things like that along the way, because even the Nintendo 64 still held on to cartridges. And it's interesting because that particular system in Japan had a floppy drive attachment that was never released here. But you're thinking of another thing that's happening in these periods, that you want to be able to save games and do other things and update and whatnot, right? So all of that kind of thing requires storage on the local system. So again, like Bill, what you're talking about is number one, people even understanding what the bit thing was, and Atari Jaguar is 64-bit. Well, the other problem they had is a lot of their game library that did exist were simply ports of their 16-bit games. So it didn't use the capacity of the hardware.
Yeah.
So that was a thing. So yeah, the general population of people buying these things are going, well, what's the difference? It doesn't look different. Yeah, the capability of a Jaguar is amazing, and some of the homebrew that's coming out on that parallels some of the AAA games you see on the PC today, because it had that capability. It's just Atari never marketed it right, and I think in some cases you saw the same thing with Sega and dealing with some of this kind of stuff. And you look at today, the average computer is 64-bit, 2026, because it's all kinds of other things. It's not just the bit capacity of a processor that determine what you can and cannot do. There's all kinds of things that work around that, where you can have a 16-bit console that's superior to a 32-bit console because of the engineering and other stuff like that. But yeah, Bill, exactly like what you're saying there is you're talking about something where it wasn't marketed properly, people didn't know the difference, and frankly, the product you got on a PlayStation was better than some of these other things that had maybe better capacity at a raw level.
And I'm not going to say that the first PlayStations didn't have some serious problems. They had performance. They were very slow to load. They were underpowered. But by the time PlayStation 1 phased out, they were a superior console to anything else.
Yeah, and it's just optical media is slower. It doesn't matter what you're dealing with, even in 2026. If you look at something like a Switch that takes a form of a cartridge, it's basically kind of an SD card, but it's still a physical solid state thing, versus any system that uses either physical media or where you have to download. There is a huge difference. I mean, it is definitely still notable to today. I know I picked up a PlayStation 2 system at a garage sale recently, and I kind of like it because it's got some of the arcade games that I like on it, like Paperboy and some of those that are done where you actually do have the true arcade version on the local machine. That thing runs off DVDs, but even loading a disc up in it is 10 to 15 seconds. And, so you definitely see it from there. And so PlayStation 2 didn't have things like a hard drive or anything yet. You have these little storage module things that go in it for saving your games. But it's not like now where after you do the initial install, it is installed to a local storage drive, and then it runs faster because of that. But it's still slower than a cartridge.
Yeah.
So, all right, next on the list is one that we just got, and we're going to review here later in the year, and that is the Nintendo Virtual Boy.
Oh, boy.
And it's been joked that this should have come with a bottle of Excedrin migraine. And after trying it out, I kind of agree with that assessment. Bill, what? Tell us a little bit about what this was.
Well, it was an attempt at virtualized 3D effects using a red and black screen inside of a headset that weighed about a ton. And as it said, you had the stationary, and you had to basically put it on a tripod and stick your face into it, play with this controller that was a little bit more complicated than the 64, I believe.
Yeah.
And had a small library. But the problem is that the vector graphics and all of that was inside of it hurt your eyes so much that it was caused headaches after about 20 minutes.
Yeah. You're lucky if you got to 20 minutes. And looking at this,
I remember hearing about this stuff.
Yeah, well, you think of today, okay, so you do a VR headset like the Oculus or a system like that. There's a couple of them out there. And it's this lightweight thing that you strap to your head and you can wear it, and it's pretty easy to use. Well, this thing was so heavy that you couldn't strap it to your head, so it's on a stand. So you're sitting at a table or something, and for some reason the stand's not adjustable a little bit, but not like in a way that would be meaningful. So you're having to hunch down or put it on books or something to get it at a height. And then, like you said, Bill, you lean into it, and you've got the controller, and it's black and red. And there are certain people on this planet that will know who they are that may have worked with red grid things in the military. It's very similar to that, except the red grid military one was easier to use. It's pretty intense, and it's too bad because the concept's kind of cool. But the implementation of this is definitely, if you sell your hardware and it creates headaches, that might not be the best marketing technique.
Yeah.
Well, red is such a weird color to use because of how often you have red color blindness.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. It's a weird color to use anyway. It's very hard. As far as things go, we're not going to dive into the psychology here of it, but there is psychology on the color red versus other things. If they had gone monochrome with blue or green or white monochrome, which might have made more sense,
it gave it a more Tron look by using black and white and gray. That probably would have worked better.
There were a few red monochrome monitors out over the years too,
and there were the amber ones too.
Yeah, but amber was okay. Red, there's a reason why not a lot of those were made.
Oh, there was green too.
Yeah, green was
green
okay.
were popular.
Yeah. Green was the most popular, I think.
Yeah.
But anyway, all right. Next one on the list, and this was one that I really didn't know that much about, is Apple actually ventured into video game consoles for a little while in 1996 with a thing called the Pippin. And again, it's Apple, so it has to cost more, $599 and $1996.
So is this Bandai the reference to the people who make the toys?
Bandai was the company, yes. Bandai is a toy company, so they were involved in that.
Okay.
And manufacturing, that kind of stuff. It competed against PlayStation, Nintendo 64, and the Sega Saturn. There were a few good games on it. But again, people weren't sure what it was supposed to be. Computer, console, internet appliance, multimedia machine, and it came from Apple, which knew how to market computers. Although remember, Apple in that period was almost bankrupt. So they were having some problems with their company too. You don't think of it now. Apple today is very different from the Apple in those days. And sales were low on the retro market, very collectible these days. This will command more than it originally sold for in a lot of cases for a good one. But your Apple video game console, I can only imagine.
And Bandai made beautiful toys. I have some Bandai toys.
Yeah.
And those are cool. I was surprised to see their name linked to a video
Bandai
game.
does a lot of things, and they're a good company, in my opinion. I mean, they're out there, but they're not definitely with this whole situation. There's a big story that goes on this that could be an entire episode on its own. And if you're interested in deep diving on more of this, let us know on userfriendly.show, because I'd be happy to do it, depending on what everybody would like to hear. The next up on our list is the Atari Lynx, 1989. So we're going back a few years. And this one, I think, is a bummer. I have one of these. I had it in the time. I really like it. It competed with the Game Boy. It was more expensive, and they complain about things like the battery life and stuff. But it was a definite improvement over what the capability of it was. The screen at a bare minimum. One of the things that Atari didn't have that Nintendo did at that time was franchises like Super Mario Brothers, Legend of Zelda, and so on. Tetris was another one they had licensed. Interestingly enough, because Atari had the license for Tetris in the arcade, but failed to get the license to do it on home video game consoles. Nintendo picked that up. So very popular game at the time. And if you're going to sell your video game system, especially if it's one that costs more money, you have to have games that people want to buy it for that are exclusive. That ecosystem is very important, which didn't have the case here. But one of the biggest things I liked about the Lynx over the Game Boy was the Lynx was backlit and it was color.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, color during that time was a big deal.
Yeah. And backlight was a big deal. I don't know why they didn't do that on Nintendo. I remember you had to have these special things that would light up the screen. Of course, I wouldn't know. I didn't have a Game Boy, but friends of mine did. Did you? Do you remember what you had to have a battery? Did. Yep.
Well, you had to have it in light, because otherwise it was one of those like calculator screens where it was just black on that metallic brass color.
Yes. That you couldn't see. Like, you're driving in a car, and if the light's not right, you can't see the screen. And certainly if you're trying to play it in the dark, you can't see the screen, right? So
yeah.
Someday
I remember Jeremy had like a portable, like, it was almost like a little headlamp that would shine down on his games.
Yeah.
He had all these weird little things, and he had a little bag with all the games in it and the Game Boy player and all these little things that went with it. It was kind of cool.
That would have been fun. But yeah, at the time it just didn't I don't know. And that was one of the reasons I didn't have a Game Boy, was because it was so hard to see the screen. And again, it probably would have been fun to have. And for those that did, I think, enjoy it. Let me know, because maybe I'll try to find a retro version of one of these if I can find one that works. part of the problem is these were handheld systems, which means they were dropped and stuff. So finding a working model of them, I think, could be somewhat challenging. I don't know. I'll have to check it out. So now another one that I have in my library is the Neo Geo. It's 1994, so we're back to that era, Gretchen, you're talking about, where it seemed like there were a lot of failures.
Mm-hmm.
And
oh no, it was 94. Yeah.
So how do I explain this? It was an incredibly expensive game console.
Yeah.
There's no other way to put it. I mean, you'd get into this $1,000 plus, and the games themselves were no cheaper. It used a cartridge. So Neo Geo made and continues to make arcade stuff. And one of the things about the Nintendo arcade or the Neo Geo arcade cabinet is it was basically a cartridge-based video system. So when your game in the arcade got old, you could simply switch the cartridge. They'd send out a kit that was a cartridge, a new banner for it, marquee, and side art, and it would set it up, and then you'd use the same machine again. So what Neo Geo wanted to do was bring home this experience where you could play the arcade versions of their stuff on a home game console. But in order to do that, you needed incredibly powerful hardware, and this was like the rich person's game system, and at the time it was a luxury. And it was interesting to see because where they made some of these too, you could see that they were targeting that market. Like there's a special Neo Geo that was meant to go in the car. So it was designed to be installed in your vehicle in 1994. Well, in 1994, you didn't have screens and all the rest of that in your car. So this was something that was kind of very unique, you know? And
yeah, well, what person would need to have a video game in their car?
Rich people.
Well, in 2026, that's actually standard. What was that, Bill? I didn't hear you.
Rich people.
Rich people. Yes. You know,
I mean, really, you're supposed to be driving and paying attention to driving. So was it supposed to be in the back of the car for the kids?
Of course it was in the back of the car. I do not believe it, even in those periods, it was safe to play video games while you drove your car, although I'm sure some people tried. So, you know, but because, safety is definitely one of those things. You don't have to ask. Travelers will be back on this fall for when we start doing the safety awareness, and always a very good interview we get every year. I'm going to have to ask them about video games in the cars. I'm sure that they've had some stories on their end with that. But it definitely was a system. And then it also used CDs, which brought the price down a little bit from if they had actually used cartridges. But then you also had the loading time problem like we were talking about earlier. So anyway, so that gets us through some of the list. We might do a part 2 follow-up on this, depending on if you want us to or not. So let us know at userfriendly.show. And before we end for the day, I would like Gretchen to let's do something a little bit different because we've had some questions about it. How are things going with your Saturn V Lego project?
Oh gosh, it's really weird. I'm really questioning the instructions because it'll look like it's telling me to do one thing and I go ahead and do it. And then later on, it's like, no, the pictures are different. So I'm now building it with the expectation I'm going to have to rip it apart again to make it go correctly. It's been frustrating, but I am making progress. I'm on, I think, bag 7 now on my Saturn V. So I am making progress, and I'm hoping that what I've built isn't going to have to be ripped apart again.
When you finish it, we'll have to put a picture up on our website because there's been a lot of let's just say encouragement from our listeners.
Oh, good.
And a lot of people.
And it looks really cool.
Yeah, it will be when it's done. By the way, you're not the only person that's had some difficulties putting this one together either. So that's the other thing we've got. So keep us up to date on that. And until next week, this is User Friendly 2.0, keeping you safe on the cutting edge.
User Friendly 2.0, copyright 2013 to 2026 by User Friendly Media Group, Incorporated. All rights reserved. The content is the opinion of the show's participants and does not necessarily reflect this station or platform. Requests for material use, interviews, disclosures, and other correspondence may be viewed and submitted at userfriendly.show.